So, hello everybody. Thank you very much for giving so much love to all the episodes before, and welcome back to another episode. And today I am back with Ridhima. So, Ridhima is a psychologist, and yeah, so thank you very much for being here. It's my pleasure to have you. Thank you. Ridhima, that would be wonderful if you can just speak about yourself and what you do. That would be wonderful.
Hi, Lakshit. First of all, thank you for having me here and thank you for reaching out. Like Lakshit said, I'm a psychologist, I'm a therapeutic movement facilitator, and a QPR gatekeeper for suicide prevention. I've worked in various rehabilitation centers, NGOs for rehabilitation, and I've also worked in a school as a school counselor. Currently, I'm working with adults for the betterment of their mental health. I'm freelancing as a psychologist in corporates and yeah, basically working with adults right now.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for that introduction. And getting into today's topic, what do you think is mental health? How do you define mental health in your own language?
So it's difficult to define it in a way that if you ask somebody what is physical health, you know,
Mhm.
and people would say physical health is just being healthy and being fit, and I think I'm going to define it in the same way because it's the same. It's about being healthy mentally and being fit mentally. So for me, mental health is when you're healthy, when you can make decisions easily,
Okay.
when you know that you're not taking a lot of stress, when you're capable of handling your current situation in a way that it's not hampering your health. I think
Okay.
that for me is mental health, good mental health.
Okay, so yeah, so we are going to speak about what is addiction, how people get addicted to some things and now what things can be done to leave those bad addictions behind and move forward in life. So before starting, what do you think is addiction physically and psychologically?
Hmm. So, according to my experience, addiction is a disorder that is characterized by, constant engagement with a particular substance. Now, here a substance can be anything. It can be nicotine, it can be drugs, it can be alcohol, it can be cigarettes, like I mentioned, nicotine. So, we'll be just using a broad term called substance that covers everything in it. So, addiction is basically nothing but your over engagement or your engagement with that particular substance. So, talking about physical and psychological addiction, it is when you have headaches, when you have physical symptoms like headaches, shivering, sweating profusely. All of these are physical symptoms. Now, these headaches are not the same headaches as hangover headaches. These are a little different and more severe. These headaches will not even let you have your breakfast properly. Like you would need your substance so that you can have your breakfast or you can wake up. And these headaches and these physical symptoms are entirely different than those of having a hangover next morning when you take a substance. Talking about psychological symptoms of addiction, these are when you have withdrawal symptoms or when you have cravings. Now, in these withdrawal symptoms, you do have headaches, you have shivering, you have heart palpitation, you shiver so much that somebody would think that you're probably having a fit or you're probably having a breakdown or something severe is happening to you.
Okay.
This is when you reach an extent of addiction where you cannot do without it. And so craving is when you crave for that particular drug so much that you stop eating your food, you stop going to work, you can't sleep. So you need that substance to sleep properly, to eat properly, to work properly. So you, in a way, get dependent on that particular substance. This is what is addiction.
Okay, okay, great. And what is the point? An addict, like a habit becomes addiction. Let it be a bad or a good. Like, what do you think? What is something which makes an habit an addiction?
So there are a lot of similarities between a habit and an addiction. The words also seem to sort of resonate when we hear them together. But there are a lot of differences also.
Yeah.
It takes no time for a habit to become an addiction. In no time, your particular habit will become an addiction. So let's take an example of a cigarette.
Okay.
So just for example, Lakshit, you smoke a cigarette, you smoke one cigarette in a day,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And at this point of time, this is a habit. Matlab, if you don't get that cigarette, to be you're fine with it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And when you get it, you smoke that cigarette. Now, this is a habit. Now, what is an addiction? An addiction is when you cannot wake up properly without that cigarette. When you need that cigarette in the morning to function properly.
Yeah.
How some people cannot use the washroom without using their cigarette, or how some people cannot, they would say that, um, something's missing today. I think I'll smoke and feel better, you know. So all of these things, and also when you think that you cannot go without a cigarette, like you cannot finish a day without a cigarette, that is when it tells us that it is an addiction and not a habit. Also, if we get into more technical information about a habit and an addiction, then it would be that, the amount of time and effort required to, change uh, change your behavior towards a particular substance
Mm-hmm.
tells us everything about whether it's a habit or an addiction. So a habit takes minimum effort, minimum time to change or to get modified.
Okay.
But whereas an addiction is going to take multiple um, trials, multiple failed trials to actually leave that particular substance or modify that particular addiction. So I think that is a major difference between an addiction and a habit.
Okay. Okay. And how does a brain functions when we use nicotine or drugs? What do you think
Hmm.
about that?
Hmm. So let me explain it in a simple way first. Um, when you use a particular substance, your brain, and that substance reaches your brain, then as a reflex action, as a response,
Mm-hmm.
your brain releases some neurotransmitters that make you feel good and pleasurable,
Okay.
right, in response to the substance you take. So you basically use your substance or nicotine to feel more pleasurable, to feel more happy, to feel more calm. So people usually use a cigarette, if I can take an example of a cigarette, because that's the most commonly used
Yeah.
substance.
Yeah.
So people usually use a cigarette to control their mood. If they've had a stressful day, the first thing they're going to do coming out of their office is light up a cigarette, you know, because you do feel less stressed when you smoke, because your brain responds like that to that cigarette. This is how your brain functions. But what we're doing is we're getting dependent on a cigarette to make us feel like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is how your brain functions when you take a
Okay.
substance or when you take a cigarette. Yeah.
Okay. And how smoking or drugs can, harm our mental health? Like, what can it do to us mentally?
Hmm. So I think that's a very good question, because people don't know about the fact that these things can damage your brain and can deteriorate your mental health. A lot of us don't know that. But the truth is that, drugs, tobacco are very strongly associated with various disorders, you
Okay.
know. So a smoker or somebody who uses drugs is more likely to fit in the criteria of a mental health condition than a person who doesn't use it. You know? So the people who use cigarettes or the people who use drugs are more prone to having a mental health condition than the normal population, I would say.
Okay.
And also, it's more difficult for people who have this comorbid, uh, you know, comorbid issue of taking a substance and dealing with a mental health issue. It's more difficult for them to get off that substance and leave a cigarette, for example, but it is scientifically proven. There are researches on the fact that once you leave a cigarette, your mental health becomes much better. Yeah.
Okay. And how, like, why it's difficult for anybody to give on these drugs, like, you think? What makes them, what makes it harder?
So it's definitely very hard to get off the substance you're using because leaving your particular substance even for a day, like I said, would cause withdrawal symptoms like irritability, more anger, or depressive mood, or restlessness, or uneasiness in body, feeling anxious,
Hmm.
and basically you can no more control your mood with that one cigarette or with that substance, and now your body is going to react the way it is going to react,
Yeah.
and so it becomes very difficult for you to handle that reaction because you've never really handled it. You've always suppressed that reaction by using your substance or by having a cigarette.
Okay.
So that is why it becomes very difficult for a person to leave or get off the substance.
Okay. And is there any theories behind, behind these drugs and substances?
Yes, of course, yes. So, talking about a theory, the theory is called the gateway theory, where it says that the use of tobacco or any other drug increases your risk of using the other drugs that are more harmful.
Okay.
So, so any drug can be a gateway drug. Usually, if we look at from a smaller lens than the actual world, then um, a cigarette is usually seen as a gateway drug. So you're going to start with a cigarette, and then that cigarette is no more going to give you the pleasure it was giving you. And then from that cigarette, you'll go to alcohol, and then when you think that alcohol is not affecting you that much, then you'll switch to cannabis maybe, and then from cannabis the drug increases to more harmful drugs. So I'm not saying that cannabis or cigarette or alcohol is not harmful. It is equally harmful. But there are more drugs in the hierarchy that are even more harmful. So, so basically, just to shorten the theory, it says that uh, any drug can be a gateway drug to other drugs. And you will be surprised to know, Lakshit, that um, when these drugs are consumed when you're younger, like when you're below 18, then
Hmm.
you're more prone to having an addiction than a person who starts using these drugs, say when he's 30 or in his late 20s.
Okay. Okay.
So this is what the theory says. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
about one drug being a gateway drug.
Okay, and now as you have mentioned regarding to the 18, below 18 age. So I just wanted to get this question, that why people under age of 18 or young people get
Hmm.
into these kind of why do they start developing these addictions? Like, what's the reason?
Yeah, so what we don't know is that during your age of adolescence, if I may say it, adolescence or teenage, the human brain goes through a lot of changes,
Okay.
you know, and these changes in the structure and the functioning of the brain, um, while the areas of the brain are still maturing, uh, and you consume a particular substance or a drug, then it sort of is a misfit for your brain to take, because it's still developing your skill of decision making. It is still developing the skill of handling emotions. It's still trying to adjust with the fact whether this is right or this is wrong, handling confusion, handling the fact whether I belong to the kids or I belong to adults. They're somewhere hanging in between. They don't like sitting with kids, they don't like sitting with adults. They're somewhere in the middle, and that causes a lot of confusion, you know, and also a void. If it's not handled properly, it also causes a void in them, and this void leads them to switching to some or the other drug. But it is extremely dangerous to consume a particular drug in this age, in your teenage, when you're below 18. I would say when you're in the bracket of, say, 13 to um, 23, 24 also. It's quite harmful because your brain is still developing, your brain is still maturing,
Yeah.
and it's still in process. It hasn't developed completely. You're still learning new habits.
Okay.
you know
Okay.
and if you learn this habit, then this becomes a more dangerous habit to be learned.
Okay, okay. And this one question I just wanted to ask you: isn't
Yeah.
these kind of addictions young people have? Isn't it because they just want to look cool, or sometimes when they are with their friend groups and there is somebody smoking, it looks cool when he's using that smoke, and uh, uh,
Yeah.
that also pushes somebody to also smoke to look cool in that group, or um, just to engage in that group, become the part of that group. Does it even makes them to think about smoking, or taking some kind of drug?
According to my experience, I'm sure it's different for different people.
Yeah,
First of all,
of
everybody
course.
has their own reason of starting to smoke or starting with drugs. Everybody has their own reason. But if we look at it as what is the most commonly reason that I hear is, yes, peer pressure, in young children and adolescents. So, Lakshit, I'd also want to tell you that, what do you think is the age of the youngest addict? What would be the age of the youngest addict according to you in India?
In India, maybe 12.
So I've seen a client who was just 6 years old.
Okay. And
Yeah,
he was
and
addicted to
he
what kind
was
of drug?
inhalants,
Okay.
commonly known as in their language, in their language, solution. They put it on a cloth, and they just put that cloth in their mouth, and then they inhale it. And
Okay.
that is the addiction they use. When you see children on the street, they are usually on this drug. They're
Okay.
usually on this substance. So imagine how much harm this substance is doing on them. They're just six,
6.
technically speaking, in first standard.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is extremely dangerous. And coming back to your question, for these kids, the reason is peer pressure, because everybody else is doing it, so I'm going to do it. Also, for them, it skips a meal. If they use that drug, they won't have dinner. They don't have the money to have dinner. And so it skips that meal, and they can sleep in the night and then wake up and have something if it's available. So for these kids, it skips a
Okay.
meal. It saves money. But for adults, for adolescents who have money, who are privileged, for them, it starts with looking cool. It starts with, I want to fit in this group. I want
Yeah.
to, maybe fit in this particular particular group, and this group is really cool. I'll be called very cool if I fit in this
This
particular
group.
group.
Yeah.
It starts with that. Yeah, it starts with that. But if you have more reasons, if you have, if I just put it in this way, if you're vulnerable, you're going to get addicted. You
Okay.
can have n number of triggers. Say your environment, maybe your home environment is not that healthy. Maybe the relationship of your parents is not
Yes.
very healthy. Maybe your relationship, your romantic relationship is not healthy, it is toxic. Or maybe generally feel lonely, you don't have anybody to talk to. So these are some of the various reasons that I hear. But like I said, every individual will have their own reason. But it does, like in children, it does start with looking cool. The children, the kids you see in college, for them it is mostly to fit in that cool group, and become a part of that cool group so that our identity changes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. 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 And
So, like I said, various people have various
kind of,
reasons.
yes, of course, of course. And this question is also just wanted to ask you is living these drugs, can anybody like a lot of people say I'm addicted to chocolates, so is that even taken as addiction in psychology? Do they consider it as an addiction, or it's just normal addiction which can be live in, like okay, you eat it and we can just stop you giving buying or giving you chocolates, so you can the addiction will go. So is there such things happening? Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, addiction is anything that you take in excess and it's bothering your body. So,
Okay.
like you quoted, this example of having a chocolate in excess, and of course, the chocolate is going to harm you because it can cause diabetes later,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. So, if anything that can bother you later in life, health wise, according to me, is an addiction. But according to psychology, according to our field, there are only a few addictions listed. They are, of course, more being added. Like last year, there were two more addictions added to the list. That was gaming disorder,
Yeah.
uh, the students who play game all the time, and it was internet addiction. So these two were added to the list, to the already existing list, and the already existing list has, say, alcohol addiction, then cannabis addiction, then addiction of opioids, addiction of, say, heroin, cocaine, addiction of nicotine is also a disorder, and porn addiction,
Yeah.
that is also an addiction. And I'm missing something. um, yeah, gaming, there's porn, there's substance, there's alcoholism. Yeah, and there are many more addictions that I think we can't come up with right now. But yes, that the list goes on. But the the recent additions done were of internet addiction and of gaming
Gaming.
disorder.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how can we help anybody who's addicted? How can I, like, if my friend is addicted, how can I help him or her? Like,
Hmm.
how can we help anybody who's addicted to anything?
Hmm. So I think as a caregiver, I would call it a caregiver because you're providing care to that particular person and you are
Okay.
a caregiver. So as a caregiver, I think you first need to understand where this person is coming from
Okay.
and what this person's feeling. Often, when we see somebody who's really drunk, we we judge them for being drunk. We probably show our anger towards them, that why are you drinking, this that, and you just keep questioning them. So the first big no, according to me, would be to not question them like that, because they themselves are questioning themselves for what situation they are into
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and they are trying. It's not like they're not trying. They're constantly trying to leave that particular drug, but they're addicted to it so much body wise, like we mentioned earlier. So the physical and psychological addiction is so much that they're unable to leave it. So we need to empathize with them. We need to sort of step into their shoes, understand the situation from their point of view,
Mhm.
and then provide support.
Okay.
As a friend, the first thing that you should do is make your friend reach out to a therapist, very importantly. So your friend should probably reach out to a therapist and सबसे पहले start therapy, so that the therapist can analyze whether this is very severe or it can be handled without going to a rehabilitation. The best way to get off your addiction is to go to a rehabilitation center, because if we talk about how can we deal with addiction, then the best way to deal with addiction is to actually go to a rehabilitation center. And I want to explain why. How does a rehabilitation center help you in getting off your addiction? So the first thing you need to do is to change your environment. And why do I say change your environment? It is because when you get out of your house, you have your substance easily available.
Yeah.
You know, if you walk for a kilometer, you'll find at least 2 3 shops of liquor and at least 10 shops of cigarettes, right? And of course, you know the contacts. You, I'm sure, like if somebody is addicted, then they have their set of contacts, and they have their
Yeah.
set of,
Yeah.
in slang language, say setting with people, and
Yes.
they can get their substance very easily. You know, so an environment change is important, because if you go to a rehab, all of this is not available, and you can't even see liquor shops, you know. So that is the best time for you to work on yourself, and to work on, and to first get to know the triggers, that
Okay.
okay, this is the reason why I got addicted, and this is something that I need to modify. So with environment change, I would also add that you need the modification of having therapy also. So this environment change, of course, has the change of being in a different place where your substance is not available, number one. Number two, having a good therapist who knows about addiction and who knows how to work on that particular addiction with you, to just first list down the possible causes, that probably these were the causes that you started getting addicted to this particular substance, and then noting down the triggers, what can possibly trigger you to again use your substance, working on that, and then probably making a few changes, in your environment. Also, the caregivers are supposed to yeah so also the caregivers are supposed to know how to handle a person when he's coming back home from a rehabilitation center.
Okay.
And for that, therapy really helps, because imagine a person is getting off his or her substance and coming back home in the same environment and facing the same triggers,
Yeah. Yeah.
handling same things. It is more likely for that person to have a relapse.
Okay.
So not only you need a change environment there, you also need to change your environment here.
Yeah.
And that is how therapy helps you. And if your environment cannot be changed, then therapy is going to empower you with how you can cope up with your current environment, and how you cannot let it affect you the way it was affecting you before.
Okay.
So this is how we get off that
The
particular addiction.
addiction. Okay. So yeah, before ending this session, the last question I have to you is, what would be your message before ending this? Like, what would be your last note, a message you would like to leave over here?
So I think I'll just give a general message
Sure.
for the audience watching this. Um, Keep mental health your first priority. You know, if you think that something's bothering you, if you think that you're emotionally stressed or distressed, please look for a therapist. because in India, this field has been stigmatized and is facing a lot of stereotypes of the fact that you need to have a severe condition to go to a therapist. No, it's not true. Yes, you do need a therapist when you're going, like, it's compulsory for you if you're having a severe condition to go to a therapist. But therapy is also for you and me, for us to just get emotionally to just handle that emotional distress, to handle how we're feeling, to get more sorted, to
Okay.
understand our thoughts, to channelize our thoughts, and basically to express. So I'd just say that please express your emotions and don't suppress them, because the more you suppress them, the more it's going to burst out one day. So just keep talking, and if you think that you do not have somebody to talk to, then you do have a big community of mental health professionals, therapists, who provide you with a non judgmental ear, and you can just talk to them about everything and they would not judge you.
Judge, of course. Yeah.
So take therapy as normally as going to a physician. Like when you have cough and cold, you visit a physician. When you're emotionally distressed, please go to a therapist. They're going to teach you a healthy way to deal with that particular emotional distress. So my message to everybody would be that please keep talking and keep expressing and keep spreading the awareness that you have regarding mental health.
Yeah, true, true. Yep. Thank you very much. And it was wonderful having you. And thank you very much for giving so much wonderful tips about and speaking about addiction and everything. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Like, beautiful session. I think it made me learn so much again.
My pleasure.